Welcome to Less Than 12 Parsecs, the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. Now here's your host, Tim McMahon.
Hello, what have we here?
Hey, it's Tim, and it's a big Star Wars news day today. Big news, which I know you already know by now. Because really, as I've said 100 times before, nobody comes to Less Than 12 Parsecs to get their Star Wars news, nor should they. But because this is a Star Wars podcast, I am obligated, I am required, I am destined to talk about all the big news drops in the world of Star Wars. So what was the big news that dropped today? As if you didn't know, well, the Episode 9 cast was announced. Is this big news? I'm just calling it news. As you could have guessed, all your old favorites from the previous sequels are coming back. We have Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, Lupita Nyong'o, Domhnall Gleeson, Kelly Marie Tran, Billy Lord, and Eunice Satamo. Sorry, man. One of these days I'll learn his name. Also announced was some new actors joining the cast. Some of these we already knew about. Carrie Russell, yeah, I was talking about her just the other week here on Less Than 12 Parsecs. That rumor's been out there for a while. Man, Carrie Russell from Felicity, a bunch of movies, and The Americans. Do yourself a favor, go watch The Americans. Such an awesome show. Also joining the cast was Richard E. Grant. Who's that, you're probably asking? Well, if you see a picture of his face, you'll go, oh yeah, that guy. I know that guy. I've seen that guy before. He's pretty good. And then Naomi Ackie. Naomi Ackie was a name I did not know. Had to look her up on IMDb. Not familiar with her work, other than it said she was in Doctor Who. I watch Doctor Who, so I've probably seen her before. But again, nothing else in her IMDb listing stood out at me. They also announced some classic legacy actors returning to their roles. These are ones you could have guessed. Anthony Daniels. Of course, 3PO is going to be in it. Mark Hamill. Force Ghost Mark Hamill? I wonder. We'll get to more about that in a second. And then finally, they finally made it official. Mr. Billy D. Williams, oh yeah, will be reprising his role as Lando Calrissian. Finally, it's official. So, the big news out of this cast announcement, the thing I think everyone's talking about, is Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher, who, as you know, we sadly lost, will be returning as Leia Organa. They're not doing CGI. They're not going to recast the character. Apparently, they're going to use scenes that were filmed for Episode 7 and then never used. So I've been trying to figure out how I feel about this all afternoon. Well, on one hand, and I'm going back and forth, so please forgive me here, but on one hand, great. It's great we're going to see Carrie on the screen again as Leia. It's great that she's here in one form or another to finish out the storyline of the Skywalker saga. I don't know what they're going to do with the character. I don't know if they're going to kill her off on screen. But it's great that she's there in some form. But then on the other hand, the fact that they're using leftover stuff from Episode 7, stuff that was filmed and never used, I'm not a screenwriter. I'm not a writer of any kind. How are they going to work around this? How are they going to make this fit? I'm sure J.J. Abrams and his writing partner on this, Chris Terrio, the two of them, they have a job ahead of them of somehow writing around these unused Leia scenes from Episode 7. Again, I'm not a screenwriter, I'm not a writer, but man, oh man, oh man, does that, to me, seem like a hard job. I hope and I pray that that the final project does not come across as obvious. You know what I mean? I hope it's not obvious that these are scenes that they shot a couple of years ago. And I hope it's not obvious that these are scenes that are being shoehorned into this story because they were written for Episode 7. So, yeah, I'm torn on this. Happy she's there. Worried it won't work out. But I have faith. I gotta have faith. So I gotta tell myself, I gotta have faith. These guys are professionals. They know what they're doing. They'll figure it out. They'll do it. They'll make it work somehow. Yeah. Right now, though, just knowing the fact that these were scenes written for Episode 7, this really gives us some great ammunition for some speculation. But I'm not ready to speculate yet on Episode 9. Actually, I have one weird thought about Episode 9 that for some reason has been in my head all day today after I read this announcement. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense. It's not a prediction. In fact, it's kind of stupid. But for some reason, when I read that Mark Hamill is coming back, well, of course, we all know, oh yeah, Force Ghost. Easy to do. It'll be great. But for some reason, what popped in my head was the fact that in the early drafts of Return of the Jedi, one of the ideas that Lucas played with was the idea of having Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda come back to the physical world in a physical form from the Force. Yeah, they died, they become one with the Force, they become Force ghosts, but when needed, they had the ability to come back, to resurrect, take a corporal form, to be in the real world again. I don't know why that idea has been in my head all day, but these new filmmakers, they're always mining the past, the unused bits of mythology and art and settings and technology from the original trilogy. Who's to say they couldn't use this weird idea from an early draft of Return of the Jedi and have Luke come back to form? I don't think it'll be done. The reason it wasn't used in Return of the Jedi is because it took away from Luke's journey, Luke's final battle with the Emperor and Vader, and having Luke come back in Episode 9 in a physical form would do the same thing for Rey. It would take away from her journey, her confrontation with Kylo Ren. So I don't think it'll be used. But for some reason, that's been in my head all day. And finally, one other thing that I've already seen pop up online was the casting of Richard E. Grant. A lot of people are speculating, a lot of people are guessing, a lot of people are hoping he could play everyone's favorite blue-skinned chiss, Grand Admiral Thrawn. If you think about it, he looks like he could play the part. Paint him blue, dye his hair, have him show up with a armada of hyperspace whales. Who knows? I don't think that'll happen either. It would be cool. I'll admit it. I'm a fanboy enough to say, oh yeah, that would be cool. I'd like to see that on screen. But again, I don't think it'll happen. Anyway, those are my initial thoughts on the Episode 9 cast announcement that we got today from StarWars.com and Lucasfilm and Disney and all those good groups of people. What did you think of this announcement? Was there any news that surprised you? Has it led you to any odd ideas about Episode 9? If so, I want to know. Email me at 12parsecs.podcast@gmail.com or connect with me on any of my social media accounts. All the links can be found on my website, 12parsecs.podcast.com. Thanks for listening. Utini!
You've been listening to Less Than 12 Parsecs, the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. For links and show notes, visit our website, 12parsecsPodcast.com. Follow Less Than 12 Parsecs on Twitter at 12parpod, on Instagram at 12parsecsPodcast, on Tumblr at 12parsecsPodcast, and find us on Facebook as well. And please let us know what you think. Email us at 12parsecsPodcast@gmail.com. All Star Wars sounds, music, images, logos, designs, characters, and elements are registered trademarks and copyright of Disney, Lucasfilm Limited, and their subsidiaries and respective rights holders, and used by Less Than 12 Parsecs Podcast under fair use doctrine. All original content is copyright Tim McMahon and Less Than 12 Parsecs Podcast, released under the No Derivative Works Creative Commons license.